So here I am in the suburban town of Ra'anana, which is just 1 hour from Jerusalem. So what you can hear in the background are the sirens, alerts going off in the southern districts near the border with Gaza. So this is what the rocket alert siren app looks like. We'll have to wait in the shelter now. I'm just going to turn, so you can see here. I'm actually really nervous right now. A friend of the family has passed away and there's been a funeral. This is Jodie Cohen reporting for WION from central Israel.
You just saw my colleague Jodie Cohen reporting from Jerusalem. You must have seen her anchoring news shows on this channel. For the past few days, as rockets rained on Israel, she's been hosting news broadcasts while telling us she may have to take shelter in a bunker if a siren goes off in the middle of a show. Thankfully, it hasn't come to that. But it has been a harrowing time for her and her family, and I'm sure many other families on both sides, Israeli and Palestinian, they're all suffering the same. The situation is sensitive. What started as violence near the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem turned into indiscriminate rocket attacks from both sides and now ethnic clashes in many parts of Israel. Is the country on the brink of a full-blown war? We hope not, but the rhetoric and attacks from both sides are not helping. Tonight on Gravitas, we bring you the full story of an escalation in the middle of a pandemic. Also on the show, an independent panel on the pandemic says the World Health Organization failed, the global catastrophe was preventable, but it doesn't name or blame China. Same with President Erdogan of Turkey. He has a take on everyone when it comes to handling Islam. He speaks about France, he talks about Gaza, but no word on China's Muslims or how they're treated. Here's a toy story you must know if you're a parent. The number of children needing medical help after swallowing magnets has increased 5-fold. Why? Blame the toys. And gone are the days of red roses, we're told. Now couples are gifting blue chip stocks to each other. We bring you the story and evolution of gifting, also how big a market it is. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
India's apex drug regulator grants permission to conduct phase 2 and 3 clinical trial of Bharat Biotech's Covaxin COVID-19 vaccine for the age group of 2 to 18 years. The trial will be conducted on 525 healthy volunteers, according to India's health ministry. The World Health Organization is reviewing coronavirus data from Seychelles after the country's health ministry said that more than a third of people who tested positive for COVID-19 had been fully vaccinated. Both the ministry and the WHO stressed, however, that a majority of positive cases had either not been vaccinated or had only received one dose.
I had a conversation with Bibi Netanyahu.
US President Joe Biden speaks to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and says that Israel has a right to defend itself against rocket attacks. However, Biden says he hopes the violent clashes with Palestinians will end soon. Biden adds that US diplomacy was in high gear and in constant contact with counterparts in the Middle East. In a further sign of strained ties, the Philippines says it reported incursions into its exclusive economic zone by 287 maritime militia vessels from China. The Philippines Task Force on the South China Sea said that the incident has been reported to relevant agencies for possible diplomatic actions. The second wave of COVID-19 and subsequent lockdowns in India have impacted more than 7.5 million jobs, taking the unemployment rate to a 4-month high of 8%. The Center for Monitoring Indian Economy says that the situation on the employment front is expected to remain challenging going forward. Tesla CEO Elon Musk says that the electric car maker is suspending purchases with Bitcoin, triggering a slide of the digital currency. In a Twitter post, Musk cited concerns that the increasing use of fossil fuels for Bitcoin mining and transactions had a damaging impact on the environment. He signaled that Tesla might accept other cryptocurrencies if they are much less energy intensive. Sierra Leone's government will move to abolish the death penalty in the West African state, the Deputy Justice Minister said. No execution has taken place in the country since 1998, and death penalties are often commuted. The country has frequently come under fire from rights groups for keeping capital punishment on the books. Cuba began a mass vaccination campaign in the capital Havana using a homegrown vaccine that has not yet been shown to work as yet. The move is seen as an emergency step to stem the surge in coronavirus cases, as authorities aim to eventually vaccinate 1.7 million people. In form world number 4, Aryna Sabalenka has become the latest high-profile casualty in the women's draw of the Italian Open. Winner of the title in Madrid last week, Sabalenka was stunned in straight sets, 7-5, 6-3 by 17-year-old American prodigy Coco Gauff in the round of 16. It means that 6 of the world's top 10 ranked players have suffered upset defeats, while a 7th defending champion Simona Halep has been forced to pull out due to a serious injury. The final of this season's UEFA Champions League between Manchester City and Chelsea has been officially moved from Turkey to Portugal because of COVID-19 restrictions. The match on May 29th will now be held at the Estádio do Dragão in the city of Porto, and 6,000 fans from each club will be allowed to attend. Unlike Turkey, Portugal is on the UK's green list, meaning fans and players can travel there without having to quarantine on return.
After a dip on the first 2 days of this week, new infections are back up again. For 3 weeks now, India has been reporting more than 300,000 new infections daily. In the last 24 hours, more than 360,000 people have tested positive in India. Active cases are growing again. India has more than 3.7 million active cases. The growth in recoveries remains steady. Close to 20 million people have recovered by now. But no respite in the number of fatalities. For more than 2 weeks, deaths recorded in India have exceeded the 3,000 mark, 3,000 a day. For the past 2 days, the number has exceeded 4,000 a day. In the last 24 hours, more than 4,100 people have died in India. The bad news does not end there, unfortunately. The impact of this deadly surge is showing on India's economy. A think tank has put out some data, and this is what it says. India's unemployment shot up to 8% in April. It was at 6.5% in March. Almost 7.4 million jobs have been lost during this surge, 7.4 million in a month. In January this year, more than 400 million citizens in India were employed. That number is now down to 390 million. Almost 34 million citizens are now actively looking for a job in this country. What's happening with the vaccinations? The shortage persists. A new advisory has been issued, and this is what it says. If you have recovered from COVID, you will have to wait for 6 months to get your shot. What's the logic behind this? Studies show that 80% of those infected will remain protected for 7 months. They will have antibodies, so they can wait for their shot. If you have taken 1 dose of Covishield, you will have to wait for 12 to 16 weeks for the second shot. This is the second time in 3 months that the dosage interval for Covishield has been widened in India. First, the gap was 28 days between 2 shots. That's 4 weeks. Then it was increased to 6 to 8 weeks, and now it's 12 to 16 weeks. Does this happen in any other country? Yes, it does. Spain is the only other country that allows citizens to wait up to 16 weeks for the second dose. What about the rest? The United Kingdom and the European Medicines Agency, their regulator, advise 4 to 12 weeks, the gap between 2 shots, 4 to 12 weeks. The World Health Organization recommends 8 to 12 weeks. What about Covaxin? There's no change in the dosage interval there. You can take your second jab after 28 days. There is a recommendation for pregnant women too. The government panel says that they should be able to choose their vaccine. Now, what explains these revisions? Reports say these changes are rooted in science. They may be, but it's also a fact that India is short of vaccines, and longer intervals between doses will allow us to cover more people with one shot. 1 year back, the World Health Organization appointed an independent panel, a panel to probe what went wrong with the world, how the outbreak in Wuhan turned into a global catastrophe. This panel was supposed to deliver an impartial, independent and comprehensive review of the global response to the pandemic. They began their work in September 2020. Now we are in May 2021. Their report is out and it does not blame China. It does not name China for its cover-ups. It does not call out China for the crackdown on whistleblowers. It does not even question China's delay in reporting the outbreak in Wuhan. So what does the report do? It delivers a lengthy and detailed explanation of how this pandemic began without naming any country or leader. This should be compulsory reading on how to sit on a fence if there is such a course. Before I tell you what the report says, let me tell you about who wrote it. A panel created by the World Health Organization, and this is different from the panel that investigated the origins of the pandemic. This panel, the one we're talking about tonight, focused on how the outbreak became global. It was led by two individuals, Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the former President of Liberia. This report is called COVID-19 Make It the Last Pandemic. It has 86 pages. It will be presented to world leaders next week when they meet for the Global Health Summit, an event that is being hosted by the G20. Now for the contents of the report. What do these 86 pages say? Question number 1. Was this pandemic avoidable? The answer is yes. The report describes this pandemic, and I'm quoting, as a 21st century Chernobyl moment. It could have been avoided. Why wasn't it? 3 reasons, 3 failures that created what they call a dangerous cocktail. Number 1, poor choices by global leaders. Number 2, an unwillingness to tackle inequalities. And number 3, a lack of coordination. Put together, these 3 factors allowed the pandemic to turn into a quote-unquote catastrophic human crisis. Question number 2, how did this crisis begin in Wuhan? The report does not offer any real answers. It tries to reconstruct a chronology of events. It says the emergence of the virus was characterized by a mix of some early and rapid action, but also by delay, hesitation and denial. By whom? They have steered clear of the 5-letter name, so we'll say it for them. China, delay and denial. What is this investigation based on? And I don't know how to say it with a straight face, but I will. This is based on a review of WHO documents and interviews. They found that China had started sequencing the virus well before they even informed the WHO about an outbreak. Again, the report does not name anyone in China, any agency or official. It has some footnotes on the silencing of critics and the cover-up. So you could say it goes something like this. China had an outbreak. It started sequencing the virus. It told the WHO much later. And by the way, it also silenced critics. 2 reports critical of the Chinese establishment found a mention in the footnotes of this report. Question number 3. What about the role of the World Health Organization? Again, the investigators pulled their punches. They identified 2 distinct failures of the World Health Body. 1, it waited too long to declare the outbreak an emergency. The report says the WHO should have raised an alarm earlier instead of waiting till the 30th of January 2020. Failure number 2, the World Health Organization discouraged travel bans, initially at least. The report says this advice constrained rapid action to stop the growing infections. Helen Clark said that as the virus was spreading, vital information was being hoarded and delayed.
Whilst the virus was spreading, information was being hoarded and decisions were delayed whilst waiting on responses to laborious exchanges of official emails. As information began to arrive at WHO, the organisation was not sufficiently empowered to investigate, validate, and then confirm at speed that a dangerous outbreak was occurring.
What about the role of Dr. Tedros? Again, the report fails to assign any blame. Nothing on how Dr. Tedros was praising China's response in the early days. What about the conflicting advice on human-to-human transmission? The report does make a mention of it, but it sounds like the panel is giving some retrospective advice to the WHO. They say that the World Health Body should have told countries to, quote-unquote, assume that human-to-human transmission was occurring. So what's the panel's conclusion about the WHO's role? It admits that the World Health Organization, the WHO, dropped the ball on more than one occasion. An emergency could have been declared early. But member states, too, did not take the threat seriously.
We believe, however, that even with the current systems, a public health emergency of international concern could have been declared by at least the 22nd of January. Even following the declaration on the 30th of January, February was a wasted month. Despite clear warnings, far too many countries believed it would not affect them, and they adopted, in effect, a wait-and-see approach.
Again, the co-chair of the panel does not take any names. The report goes on to recommend major reforms to the WHO. It should be empowered to swiftly conduct investigations into new outbreaks in any country. It calls for the creation of a new Global Health Threat Council. It suggests that the WHO Director General should serve only a single 7-year term in office. An incumbent should not be allowed to run for re-election. Now, these reforms are necessary. But will any reform be effective if the panel decides to downplay its own findings by reducing China's crackdown on whistleblowers to footnotes, by refusing to hold those in powerful positions to account, whether it's the WHO Director General or China, which, by the way, is one of the biggest donors to the World Health Organization? How can any reform work when a door is left open for a powerful country to hide the facts and then get away with it? The world is hesitating in calling out China for its cover-up. And Beijing is now openly leveraging this silent exoneration. The International Federation of Journalists has released a report. It says China is now using this pandemic to boost its global profile. This report gathered data from 54 journalist unions in 50 countries and territories. More than half of them said that coverage of China in their country is now more positive. In some countries, China has become the source of the most accurate information about the Wuhan virus. So here's what's happening. After unleashing a virus on the world, Beijing is controlling the global narrative on the pandemic. This year, it dictated the report on the origins of the virus. It refused to give raw data on early cases. And now, with global leaders declining to blame it for the outbreak, China has the opportunity to whitewash all its sins. Today is the 13th of May. For many in West Asia, it's Eid al-Fitr, one of the holiest days in the Islamic calendar. In Israel and Palestine, this day is marked with airstrikes, rocket bombardments, rioting and violence. The situation continues to be grim. The clashes which began last Friday have now taken the form of an ethnic conflict. This is no longer just Hamas versus Israel. The fighting has reached the civilians. It is Jews versus Arabs now. In Akkar, a city in northwest Israel, a lynching attempt by an Arab mob left a Jewish man critically injured. The images are on your screen. 31-year-old Elad Barzilai was on his way to rescue his students when his car was attacked with rocks. The mob then pulled him out of the car and beat him up with sticks. Reports say the victim is in a critical state. Meanwhile, in Bat Yam, a coastal city in central Israel, a Jewish mob tried lynching an Arab driver. Video footage that has emerged shows tens of people hitting the driver with metal objects.
זינו לו את הצרה, הוא מת, הבן אדם מת, אין בן אדם, הוא מת, הוא מת. אני לא יכול להבדיל. יואו, לא מאמין. יואו. די.
These attacks have been condemned by all sides. Israel's opposition leader Yair Lapid has described the situation as a complete loss of control. He says Jews and Arabs have both declared a war on Israel. A far-right Jewish leader, Bezalel Smotrich, has said that he's shocked and ashamed at the mobbing of the Arab man. The Prime Minister of Israel, too, has called the situation intolerable. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that nothing can justify the lynching of Jews by Arabs or the lynching of Arabs by Jews.
Citizens of Israel, what is happening in the towns of Israel in recent days is intolerable. We've seen Arab rioters torching synagogues, torching cars, storming policemen, hurting peaceful and innocent citizens. This is something we cannot accept. This is anarchy. Nothing can justify it. And I will tell you more than that. Nothing can justify a lynching of Jews by Arabs, and nothing can justify a lynching of Arabs by Jews. We will not accept this. This is not us. Not this violence. Not this savagery. We will bring back governance to Israel's cities everywhere, in all cities.
As I speak, almost every major city in Israel has been gripped by unrest. Lod, Ramle, Haifa, Acre, Bat Yam, Sakhnin, Tiberias, Tamra, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, you name it. It's a civil war-like situation. For Hamas, the situation has become another excuse to escalate its attacks on Israel. On Wednesday, rockets from Palestine hit several residential buildings in Tel Aviv, sending thousands of Israelis into shelters. Israel responded by blowing up an entire multi-story building in Gaza City. Look at this. This building is said to have housed Hamas leaders. Israeli forces claim that they had warned the occupants in advance to evacuate. The Palestinians say no such warnings were issued. They accuse Israel of targeting civilians, and so the cycle of violence continues. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, a total of 85 people have died since the violence began. The figure is said to include 17 children and 6 women, with more than 400 others injured. On the Israeli side, a total of 7 people have been killed, 6 of them in rocket attacks, and 1 soldier who was killed after a missile struck an Israeli convoy. A total of 31 others are said to have been injured. Now, this vast disparity in the damages on both sides is further added to the condemnation of Israel in the Islamic world. There have been large-scale protests in several Islamic countries as far away as Africa and Asia. In Kenya, hundreds of young students carried out a protest march in the capital in solidarity with Palestine. The police had to fire tear gas after the protests turned violent. In Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, there were protests outside the US embassy. This was after the country's president voiced support for Palestinians. In Lebanon, pro-Palestinian demonstrators held an hours-long protest in capital Beirut. In Turkey, it seems as if the entire country is protesting against Israel. There have been large-scale demonstrations in Istanbul, Ankara and Izmir. There are protests in South Africa too. Around 2,000 people carried out a march in Cape Town accusing Israel of killing Palestinians. The march included politicians like Mandela Mandela, the grandson of late freedom icon Nelson Mandela. In the West, we're seeing demonstrations in London, where a large group of pro-Palestinian demonstrators blocked off a smaller group of pro-Israeli demonstrators. In the US, a large group of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered outside the White House in Washington, calling the American government to stop aiding Israel. Earlier today, I also spoke with Paul Hirschson, official spokesperson for Israel's foreign ministry, and I asked him if Prime Minister Netanyahu's rhetoric was adding fuel to the fire, and how Israel feels about civilian casualties on either side. This is what he said. Both sides are being impacted by the violence. There are casualties on both sides. Do you believe this could have been prevented? And do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's strong words and rhetoric is adding fuel to this fire?
Firstly, I absolutely think this could have been avoided. There was no military conflict underway between ourselves and the Hamas for the last 2 years. When you talk about, I don't know if rhetoric is the correct word, but harsh words, I may even add to those harsh words because, and I think I did already say, we're not in the mood to put a plaster on this issue once again.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate. What about the civilian casualties on the other side?
The civilian tragedies, are a tragedy. There's no question about that. And the responsibility for them lies directly at the doorstep of Hamas, both targeting our civilians deliberately and locating their military infrastructure inside sensitive civilian institutions, hospitals, schools, and mosques. It's a double war crime. It's unconscionable, it's unforgivable, and it is the responsibility of Hamas.
You've seen the clashes, you've seen the violence, you've seen the protests, and you've heard the leaders. What is it really like, though, to be in Israel right now? What's it like to witness this conflict firsthand, to live it? Our correspondent Jodie Cohen has been reporting from central Israel since this weekend. Her family and friends have been personally impacted by what's happening. She sent us a comprehensive ground report of her experience on the rocket attacks that are rising by the day, the funerals that are being held for the victims, the sound of sirens that go off every now and then, and life inside a bunker, which not many Israelis have the privilege to afford. Take a look.
So here I am in the suburban town of Ra'anana, which is just 1 hour from Jerusalem, north of Tel Aviv, also close to Haifa. It really is central Israel. And as you can see, it's a beautiful day. Nobody could imagine what is going on in Israel right now. We've got the threat of Hamas sending over more rockets to civilian targets in central Israel, across central Israel. Most people are staying inside their homes, not venturing very far at all, wanting to be able to take cover should a siren go off. We've been told to expect that there will be some rocket sirens over the next hour or so targeting civilian communities across central Israel, as we saw throughout much of the night and most of the day. I'm actually really nervous right now. A friend of the family has passed away and there's been a funeral. He died from a heart attack from the stress of the rockets. And we are going to very, very quickly go and see the family of the man who died. I'm not going to record there out of privacy to them, but I'm really nervous about driving in the roads when there could be a rocket siren go off at any moment. So what you can hear in the background are the sirens, alerts going off in the southern districts near the border with Gaza. And you can see here that there's hardly any traffic at all on the motorway. This is normally completely full of cars, and we're just sailing through because there are hardly any roads. So we've just been to see the family. The father basically was out last night when the rocket sirens went off, and he ran to get some shelter and basically just collapsed, had a heart attack from the running, from the shock. So it was not an easy evening going to see this family, but I'm pleased we did it. And now we're going to get home as quickly as we can so that we're near a shelter. So we got back okay, and actually while we were out there was a siren, so we were lucky we didn't get caught up in it. I'm just going to show you the bomb shelter that we have. We normally sleep upstairs, but we're sleeping downstairs today and last night as well, just in case there is any sirens during the night. So as you can see here, I'm trying to not show my kids in the film, but we've got a small room here where we've got a cupboard with any emergency gas masks, emergency supplies, and a fridge and a freezer for food, and mattresses on the floors that the kids are sleeping in tonight. Hopefully we won't have to get up in the night.
So it's 1:15 in the morning. We've all been woken up by a siren. This means that Hamas right now is sending rockets to civilian areas. And I've seen on the news alert that the sirens have gone off actually across Tel Aviv and across central Israel. So we'll have to wait in the shelter now. I'm just going to turn, as you can see here, my family here. We're going to be waiting here until 10 minutes after the last siren goes off. Hopefully it'll just be the one siren, but we don't know how long we'll be stuck here for now. According to news alerts, that was a volley of approximately 50 rockets fired across central Israel in one go. Israelis are thinking right now that Hamas targets Israeli civilians while Israel targets Hamas military targets. We're wondering how long this is going to go on for. Things seem to be escalating, and we're not sure where this is all going to end. Remember, the entire country of Israel is really, really small. To put things into perspective, it's the same size as the state of Meghalaya. It's about half the size of Kerala and a quarter of the size of the state of Assam. This means right now that if sirens have gone off across central Israel, that the majority of the merely 9 million population of Israel is currently right now seeking shelter somewhere. So this is what the Rocket Alert Siren app looks like. You can see every single one of these lines and red circles is a rocket siren that has been aimed from Hamas into a civilian area somewhere in Israel. These areas here, you can see where they're located. This one specifically is close to the Gaza border, but they go up as far north as Nahariya in northern Israel, so much of the country under rocket attack over the past couple of days. And it's important to note also that, I was privileged to be in a building that had a shelter, but a number of buildings in Israel don't have their own shelters or have communal ones where people have to go down a number of flights of stairs. So after another night of missiles and fear on both sides of this devastating conflict, I think it's important to reflect on the wider picture. This is Jodie Cohen reporting for WION from central Israel.
The story of Palestine is also a story of broken promises, the homeland that was promised but never delivered. Who do you blame for this? You could say Israel is the biggest obstacle to Palestinian statehood. But what about the Islamic world? Palestine was their rallying call. Even rivals like Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed on it. That's no more the case. The Islamic world has its own politics. Palestine is not a mobilizing call anymore. It's a pawn in the race for supremacy. And tonight we want to discuss the politics of the Islamic world, specifically the actions of one country and its power-hungry leader. We're talking about Turkey and its president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So let me say this first. Erdogan's politics has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with power. His actions are based on convenience, not principles. And we'll explain this by looking at three separate instances. Number one, his response to France's new separatism bill. Now, this is a highly controversial piece of legislation in France. What does it talk about? Curbing hate speech, banning virginity exams and polygamy, regulating Islamic schools, basically creating a new brand of Islam. And this bill was not drafted in a vacuum. It is a direct response to a wave of Islamist attacks in France. It's not a perfect bill, but most polls indicate overwhelming public support for it, and it's a bill. But for Erdogan, this is the end of French democracy. This is what he said on Wednesday, I'm quoting, "The adoption of this law, which is openly in contradiction of human rights, freedom of religion and European values, will be a guillotine blow inflicted on French democracy." Human rights, freedom of religion and European values. Three things that Erdogan has suddenly remembered. But look at what he's doing in his own country. He's jailing journalists, he's disappearing dissidents, many of them Muslims, and dismantling Turkish secularism. So why is he criticizing France? Not out of love for French Muslims. He saw an opportunity to one-up his rivals and he took it. But here's a question for the Turkish president. Why talk about a bill that is still being debated? Instead, why not talk about an abuse that is already underway? Which brings us to instance number 2. The Uyghur genocide in Xinjiang in China. We have 2 new reports to share with you. One is on the birth rate among Uyghur Muslims. Since 2017, there's been an unprecedented drop in birth rates in Xinjiang. The sharpest decline continues to be dominated by Uyghur Muslims. What does this indicate? What the world has known for a long time, that China is using forced sterilization to eliminate the Uyghur population. The second report talks about Muslim preachers in Xinjiang. More than 630 of them have been detained since 2014. 630 preachers, 18 clerics died in detention or shortly after their release. Now, you would expect Erdogan to be fuming at these reports, but he couldn't care less. China is a huge trading partner of Turkey, and Erdogan wants to keep it that way. For many years, Turkey was also a safe haven for Uyghur activists, but now they're being deported. Erdogan is sending them back to Xi Jinping's labor camps. So much for being the defender of Muslims. Instance number 3. The violence in Gaza. Erdogan sees an opportunity here too. A chance to hijack Islamic leadership. So what is he saying? He wants Muslim nations to send a united and clear message to Israel. He says being on the fence is the same as supporting Israel. And this has always been the plan, to peg himself as the savior of Palestine. President Erdogan of Turkey is talking about teaching Israel a stern lesson. But here's the other side of the story. Turkey recognized Israel way back in 1949. It was the first Muslim country to do so. Erdogan has rolled back most policies from that era, but not this one. So his country still recognizes Israel. In 2005, Erdogan himself visited Israel. In the last decade, bilateral trade touched $2 billion. We're not saying this is a perfect relationship, but it is a relationship nonetheless. So the next time President Erdogan calls Israel a terror state, remember that he's working to expand trade with the same quote-unquote terror state. The bottom line is this. Recep Tayyip Erdogan does not care about the Muslim community, whether in China or in Palestine or in France for that matter. Religion is just an excuse for his ambitions. If you strip away all the superficial remarks and gestures, you will find a ruthless politician, someone who praises Islam but sacrifices Muslims. Are you planning to buy a new toy for your child? And does this toy that you have on your mind contain magnets? If the answer is yes, you must watch this report. Doctors in the United Kingdom have reported a 5-fold jump in kids requiring medical treatment after swallowing magnets from their toys. Nearly half of these children were just 4 months old, and most of them had to undergo surgery to get the magnets out. So this is a story that must be told because ever since the pandemic began, a lot of parents have been buying toys to keep the kids sane and occupied and busy at home. But what many of us may not be paying attention to is how safe or dangerous these toys can be. Our next report tells you about the importance of toy safety during this pandemic.
Children explore their world by touch and taste. They will grab anything within reach. And let's face it, they will swallow anything they get their hands on. This may be normal behavior for many parents, but your child's natural curiosity can prove to be dangerous. In a letter published in the Archives of Disease in Childhood, doctors from 4 children's surgical centres in England have sounded an alarm. They say there's a 5-fold increase in the number of kids swallowing magnets. Nearly half of these children required surgeries to remove the magnets, and surgical complications after retrieval were common. But magnets weren't the only objects they had to deal with. Between January 2016 to December 2020, a total of 251 children were admitted to the 4 centres after swallowing a foreign object. Coins were the most common item, swallowed at 37%, followed by magnets at 21% and button batteries at 17%. 42% of those who swallowed magnets required surgery for retrieval, compared with just 2.5% of the button battery cases. 4% of these children experienced complications after surgeries, with magnet retrieval accounting for 80% of the cases with complications. The figures tell you the scale of the situation. The surgeries involved tell you why this is concerning. Most of the children had to undergo laparoscopy, also known as keyhole surgery, a process which requires small incisions in the abdomen to retrieve objects from the intestine. For a child who is just 4 months old, this procedure poses two major risks. They stand the risk of developing a ruptured bowel with constant pain, and if their abdomen gets contaminated, it can result in recurrent infections like stomach ulcers. Toy safety has never been more important than right now. A recent investigation in the US revealed a huge drop in toy safety during the pandemic, with many manufacturers cutting down on safety inspections due to threat of infections. Given the situation and the risks involved, health experts say that going back to basics is the best option. Buy simple toys that encourage role play, creativity, and imagination. Avoid toys that can hatch into smaller pieces. Avoid toys that contain chemicals, and simply say no to toys that contain magnets. All you have to do is read the label on the back. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Are you among those who have a hard time trying to find a gift for your partner? Do you remember the era of the Archie's cards? There was a time when everyone wanted to buy a gift for his or her partner from that store. Be it birthdays, Valentine's Day, anniversaries, stuffed toys, cards, fancy knickknacks were the most coveted gifts. And if you don't relate to this, you were probably born after the turn of the millennium, because it was around that time that Archies began to die out. Enter the internet boom and e-commerce. Stores sprung up online and gifts became extremely customizable. Gone were the days when getting your name engraved on a keychain was a big deal. People living in the remotest towns could now have their photos printed on cushion covers, coffee mugs and other merchandise and have them home delivered. And the couples who were not sure what to buy or were buying gifts for a partner too picky could play safe and buy gift cards, which by the way are still popular. But in some parts of the world, gift cards are becoming passé too. Enter stock cards, gift cards for blue chip stocks. Couples in South Korea are gifting them to each other. One investment bank has sold 20,000 stock gift cards in just 5 months. Another stock provider, and listen to this, has sold 3.4 million such cards in a matter of 20 days. 3.4 million stock cards. Who are buying these stocks? Mostly couples in their 20s and 30s. And which stocks are their favorite? Well, on top of the list is Tesla. Apple is close behind, followed by Starbucks and Netflix. A 23-year-old college student from South Korea gifted 4 stock cards to his girlfriend on her birthday. How did she react? Well, she thought it was a scam. Here's what she told a media house, or the partner told, in fact. I did not get beaten up by her, but she did say that I should increase the amount of cash I put into the gift card next time. Well, how much are these stock cards priced at? A stock in Starbucks comes for as much as a latte. Couples who want to spend more can go for Apple stock gift cards. They cost around $22 each. And then there are Tesla stock cards for couples who can afford something a little more expensive, each selling at $26. Believe it or not, the trend of gifting stocks may have something to do with Kim Kardashian. In 2017, she received Amazon, Apple, Disney and Netflix stock cards as Christmas gift. It was from her then-husband, Kanye West. The pair is now separated. But what they did may have revolutionized gifting. Who would have thought of stocks as gifts? Leave alone stock gift cards. Most of us still get confused when it comes to picking the perfect chocolate or the right flowers. Now, you know, we're not always spoiled for choice. The history of gifting goes back to the beginning of civilization, there were no cards, no ribbons, no wrapping papers then. Researchers say, back when we lived in caves, gifts were mostly unusual shaped rocks or animal teeth. They were exchanged to express one's love for another. Time changed, so did gifts. Sometime between 605 BC to 562 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar II built the Hanging Garden of Babylon as a gift for his wife. In the 16th century, the Queen of England, Anne Boleyn, had a fountain made as a gift for her husband, King Henry VIII. They say the fountain was decorated with gold, rubies, pearls, and silver. And gold reminds me of 2013, boxer Mike Tyson bought a 24-carat solid gold bathtub for his then wife, Robin Gibbons. It was a birthday gift worth $2 million. In 2012, actor Angelina Jolie gifted her partner Brad Pitt a waterfall. Planes and yachts are a common gift among the richy rich. So I'm not going to go through the list of who's given which jet to whom. But what do you think inspires these exorbitant gifting ideas? Researchers say we humans use gifts to attract or retain mates. Did you ever look at gifts that way? Even our nearest relatives, the chimpanzees I mean, often give gifts of food to females. Do you know the global gifting market, by the way, is worth $698 billion. So there's a lot of money to be made too. This is according to media startup Bazinga. It says India is expected to be one of the world's largest gifting markets by 2024. One estimate says India's gifting market is expected to cross $159 million by 2025. India is also home to the world's most famous emblem of love, the most priceless gift known to us, the Taj Mahal. A gift in memory of Mumtaz Mahal by her husband, Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. The Taj was completed in 1648. It's been 373 years, and so much has changed. Even in the middle of a pandemic, we can send customized cakes and gifts to our partners living thousands of miles away with just a click. What more, they're delivered within hours. As a gesture of love, you can also name a star after your partner. People gift holidays, handmade cookies, land and luxuries. The list is long. And just in case you're still struggling in trying to pack or pick the right gift for your partner, you might want to keep stocks as an option. You know, go the South Korea way. On that note, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching. Stay safe.
Full of bite for.